War. And that is a war crime. These, again, they're not just numbers. These are our mothers, our fathers, our sisters, my uncles in the concentration camps of the capital city. In 2022, concentration camps, imagine. In 2022, in a capital city, in a so-called civilized world. And where are we? Where is the world as the people of Tigray are perishing? And again, an estimated half of an entire civilization said to have perished if something immediate does not happen. If the world does not stand up and say, never again. Remember that? Remember you promised never again? Why doesn't that apply to my family? Where is the world? And so, I'll finish the way I started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to UMD Media's weekly show, the H Panel. The H Panel starts now, and the topic for today, the state of humanitarian truce. So we'll be appraising the humanitarian truce between Ethiopia and Tigray. And I just want to start with what the WHO director said yesterday about that.
Welcome last week's declaration of a humanitarian truce in Tigray, and we hope that it will lead to rapid restoration of public services, including electricity, telecommunications, banking, and healthcare. However, a week has passed since the truce was announced, but no food has been allowed into Tigray yet. Every hour makes a difference when people are starving to death. No food has reached Tigray since mid-December, and almost no fuel has been delivered since August of last year. The siege of 6 million people in Tigray by Eritrean and Ethiopian forces for more than 500 days is one of the longest in modern history.
And an update on that is after this speech was made by Dr. Tedros Adhanom, we know that 20 trucks made their way to Tigray today. So as we always do, again, welcome panelists. Today we have Dr. Solomon joining us. Professor Esgel is on vacation, at least from the panel. We will start what stood out for everyone. So today we'll start with Yosef and Faisal and then Solomon. Yosef, what stood out for you during the past week?
Okay, it concerns the subject matter that we are going to deal today, but at the same time, it's just the other version of it. By putting focus on the humanitarian truce, we might miss what's going on the opposite side of this genocide-faced crisis, namely the huge preparations for war. Already Ethiopian forces, about 8 is at another interview, I said it was 8 core. I made a mistake. It was 8 is, which is greater than core. Somebody gave me the numbers. It's about 225,000 forces. These are federal forces only, are massing in the northern part of Ethiopia, around Tigray. The other one is the Amhara forces. Eritrea only is supposed to have trained from 50 to 70,000. Some say 60,000. So around that number. Besides, the ones that they had before. So we have an Amhara forces of more than 100,000 of militias, Liu Hail and Fanos. About more than 300,000 of them, the combined forces of the federal and Amhara forces. Now add to that the Eritrean forces, which is about almost, it has been recruiting almost all the able-bodied people in Eritrea. It's getting more and more paranoid, that nation. So it's estimated that there are about 200,000 forces. So we have more or less more than 500,000 soldiers encircling Tigray right now. So we might forget, that's why I want to emphasize that part of the story. And I believe you could say, we could put it in an either or phenomena, but both of them, I believe, will eventually lead to war. The first one is, I mean, after having amassed this amount of soldiers around Tigray, the idea is to encircle Tigray totally, to seal it off, by covering every loophole that you could find, So if that is the aim, then encircling Tigray wouldn't make, I mean, I cannot see the necessity of it unless it is supplemented by denying all kind of services to Tigray. So the ultimate aim of such an encirclement, if they are not going to war, such an encirclement is to defeat Tigray through starvation and disease. Of course, the Tigrayan army is not going to wait. The TDF will not allow this. So that means that if that is what the Amhara, the Ethiopian and the Eritrean forces are planning, then eventually this will lead to war. The other part of it is that they might go to war now, the Ethiopian force, I mean the Ethiopian and its allied forces. I think there are three reasons that we could mention. One is they want to finish the war before the genocide became too obvious to the world. Already it's becoming very obvious, but within a month or 2 months, as hundreds of thousands of people will die, the world might not take it. So they might be planning, we might as well go ahead and finish the war right now if they could. The other factor is Eritrea, which is getting more and more paranoid as a result of this peace process, is now offering full participation in the war, the way it did in the November 20th at the beginning. So that might also be, the Ethiopian government might be tempted to take Eritrea's offer if it is going to participate fully, because the last 9 months, it was Eritrea was not participating fully. The third one is, which I suspect, is that if they are going to war, they have to do it before the rainy season comes. The reason for that is during the rainy season, the drones are the least effective. And that is the best kind of war machine that Ethiopia has at its hand right now. So for these reasons, they might decide to go to war. But eventually, all that I am saying is that either way, it will end up in war. I don't see, the only other option is, of course, to accept peace. But the peace process that is taking place right now is almost a joke. Now we have seen Kenya's vote, with Kenya and Obasanjo as mediators, it could only be buying time for Ethiopia. So I don't see how this crisis will be resolved peacefully. That's all that I felt. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking about the rainy season, there is a fear from the Tigray side that any war effort now might even have a more catastrophic effect, given that people, with whatever they have left, it's a rainy season and they might be doing some agricultural work for the next season. Faisal, what stood out for you the past week?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think I don't want to remiss without commenting that video that you shared with us. And the expression is that the young lady shared with the world. I think what you see in Tigray today is something that is really, of course, never happened in the Horn of Africa. If any, it happened in a small scale in Rwanda, which was a different kind. In Rwanda, it was an internal civil strife where two major ethnic groups were killing each other. In the Tigray situation, it is a government with all its institutions coming down on starving and basically trying to kill as many people as possible within the shortest period of time. This is really going to be a historic and a case study in Africa and in third world countries in terms of how tyrant and tyrannical governments behave. So it's heartbreaking, so to speak. In terms of the truth, which I think stood up for everybody, I'll just probably be a bit more optimistic than my colleague Joseph, because I don't have some of the intelligence reports, and although we all heard that some troop movement have taken place, but I'm always hinching back on what Ethiopia has already done and what it failed. Ethiopia has already tried to defeat and conquer Tigray when it had more power and more stable, as opposed to when Tigray was weaker with no more than 10,000 troops. And we have seen the result of that war. So I think, and I hope I'm right on this one, I think so far the conflict has climaxed and the war situation in Ethiopia has been exhausted. And I think everybody's ready for a way out. According to Jean Paul, who studied Latin American conflict for the Eastern Mennonite missionaries, have always believed that conflict, matures, and when is the belligerent group is reached to the point of maximum, they have no other way but to come to the table and sit down and talk. I believe Ethiopia has reached that, and there is no other journey to go through except to come to the table and utilize this opportunity with the truce is giving. Of course, politically, both sides sometimes talk about the truce as not being the only thing. They, or stage themselves as still being in a war mood. But at the same time, we are seeing some positive things that can say that the truth is affording everybody a way out of this situation that the two sides, particularly Tigray and the Ethiopian side, have been. Number one, as you said, Getachew, food trucks have finally entered and reached the Tigray, I think, to the tune of 21st trucks, which is confirmed by Tigray government. Number two, I think the two sides, as we have learned, have talked through their two generals, Burhan Julla and Tadesse, who met in an undisclosed location in Afar region. What they talked, we don't know, but we do know that they talked. And we do know that they talked with the acquiescence and agreement of Prime Minister Abiy on the Ethiopian side and President Debretsion. I think today's Abiy's tweet about the commission, the consultation commission, in my opinion, shows that Abiy is belaboring how he can utilize this commission again as a way out. He talked about how he likes to expand, although we don't see any moves towards that. But you can tell that now he sees the consultative commission probably as a tool to use. So that lends some support to the new journey, which is the truth, and then beyond the truth, what next? At least so far at that level, I'm optimistic. I think what we need to do And by way of recommendation is that I think both Addis and Makale need to really stick to the truth and try to, make sure that the truth go all the way and all its phases and multiple levels that it may go through. Of course, first there is the need for a powerful and well respected mediator, preferably if that mediator comes from the United States, to make sure that the truth lend itself to the next phase, which is more talks, more meaningful talks. And I think, two, that mediator probably should carry the talks to other groups such as Oromo groups, Somali, Sidama, who were excluded from the process by Prime Minister Abiy when it comes to reconciliation. I think you cannot achieve peace with Tigray only, but Tigray is the most complex issue that we need. And then I think finally, probably, Abiy needs to reestablish both his reconciliation. Well, he doesn't call reconciliation; he calls consultation commission. I think he probably needs to see if that can be changed into truth finding and reconciliation commission, so that some of the real issues that are the vexing issues on all sides can be addressed through mediation. I think the truth at the beginning. I hope more trucks will be coming in the next few days to Tigray, both for carrying food and medicine. And I think beyond that, a process of trust building can probably be initiated through the third party mediator. And from there on, we can probably, hopefully, and by looking at that young lady's pain, there is nothing we can do except to wish the right course to be exercised mainly by Prime Minister Abiy. He has the cards. He caused the war, he started the war, and he has all the power to stop the war and go to the mediation table. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Faisal. Dr. Solomon, welcome again to the panel. There are some viewers that are also welcoming you. So again, with the same format, what was the highlight of your week? What stood out for you during the past 7 days? Let me just, now you are unmuted.
Thank you, Getachew, for having me along with the panel, with the distinguished guests. So I'm humbled and grateful. There are a number of things that I agree with Yosef and Faisal, but I just want to highlight a few things. From the Atlanta press at the Rotunda, where Helena Tandis spoke profoundly. It was a message, a very sad and tragic one, where the impact of this war was not limited to the one that we see now, we witness, but generational. How Helena, who was very young, about the 1984-85, and had fled the same Tigray, carried under shoulders of her parents to the Sudan, trek all that, and made it to the United States. It's very traumatic, even for the young ones born in the United States, that they have to carry now the burden of their parents in seeing another tragic event unfolding in Tigray. So any human being watching this, their heart will bleed. It's unfortunate that we have to go through this again and again. And the people of Tigray have suffered immensely over the last century and more, generation after generation. And this needs to stop. We would need fundamental change so that we don't face this anymore. Having said that, one of the major developments last week was the passing of the bill, now Act S3199, with the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Senate. So many of you would know that, and I think our viewers would recognize that as well. Many efforts have gone to have that pass. But one disappointment and probably worry that I have is there are reports that the State Department tried to slow down or intervene in the language or the passage of that particular bill. I think there are some serious misgivings, either by relying too much or worrying too much about Abiy administration and the consequences of his failure, and putting pressure somewhere else, or to relieve the pressure on him. Either there is some lack of credibility and integrity of information within the State Department. Either there is some problem, serious analysis by policy analysts, either with the National Security Council or the State Department, the robustness and soundness of the analysis. And I am worried if there are, I hope it's not the case, that there is some residue or remnants from the Trump administration where foreign policy has been retailed to Middle East actors. So I have that worry, and it seems to manifest a little bit during this S3199. So that's another highlight for this week, and keeps me worried. And it is related to how the United States is putting pressure while trying to facilitate humanitarian assistance and supporting the so-called truce. If you see, there is a lot of paparazzi and showmanship visiting afar, all that, which in a way seems nice, overemphasis about the number of trucks going and when they would be starting, which should have been ways ago. It doesn't need publicity, you know. Humanitarian assistance has been done within Ethiopia over the last 40 years when the dirt was there, and elsewhere in Ukraine and elsewhere. It seems a lot of showmanship around the resumption of this humanitarian assistance. And I'm bothered by that because a lot of politics seems to be intertwined with humanitarian assistance when it should not be. As you know, humanitarian assistance requires, and this is by law, international law agreed, which both the United States and Ethiopia are signatory, that should be independent and should not be under any circumstances put into political, economic, or military considerations. And I am worried not only Abiy, but even the US administration may be slowly getting into that mud. And I hope that's not the case. What would reinforce that worry is that when rhetoric and substance don't meet, rhetoric is going in one way and substance is going the other way. Not only that, the measures that are taken, negative or positive, are easily reversible, but there are some substantive things that are not easily reversible but undermine the truth. For instance, when rhetoric, the showmanship, some of the statements by the communication office from Abiy's government, some media talk and his own speech seem positive, toned down of the conflict, which is good. But you can dial that up, you can switch that next day or the same day. He has done that. We have seen that. On the substantive side, there are a number of things Abiy could do, haven't done. Abiy could have sent the trucks much easier, much faster, much more. He hasn't done that. Only few trucks have trekked more than a week after he declared that. Abiy could have sent cash to pensioners in Tigray, more than 80,000 of them. The federal government or the Abiy government owes them, the previous federal government owes them their pension money. 80,000 of them are owed more than a year's worth of pension. These are in a single plane, he can send the cash. And these are retirees, elderly, infirm, sick, who are probably the most vulnerable of any population group. And this is their money. He could have done that. He hasn't done that. Neither does the US putting pressure on that. Another one, this is something he could do right away. And there are things, and again, substantive, meaning, piggybacking on what Yusuf said, mobilizing substantive number of army. When you are moving an army closer to the border, when you are supposed to step away from the conflict zone, you are moving into the conflict area, to the line of conflict. One, you are inviting conflict. Anything can spark that. These are warring armies. There is no truce in that. Second, it's much harder, we know, everybody should know, to move back an entire army of 100,000 to 100,000, including militias, special forces from Hara, all that. Never mind Eritrea from the picture, which is completely another story. So substantively, Abiy is taking measures that negatively influence the so-called truce that actually push towards conflict, and that takes substantive effort and time to move back, to draw back. But then he's not doing something easy, like sending cash, medicine, moving the trucks right away. So these are the things that stand out for me. On the humanitarian assistance, I would like to mention, I don't want to pass this one, delaying the humanitarian assistance. Humanitarian assistance is not just food aid. It needs a lot of logistics. It needs a lot of manpower. So what that mean is there is going to be substantive backlog. If you are to satisfy a bare fraction of the need in Tigray now, you're going to need thousands of trucks. You're going to need huge personnel. Given there is a serious shortfall of rain, particularly in the Somali region, it's going to impact Somali region as well, where we have seen serious drought. So I hope the United States realizes that. I hope the USAID realizes that. Every drug in humanitarian assistance seriously impacts Tigray, but also affects Somalia and other regions as well. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think all of you touched upon our today's topic, but let's go and dive into that. Today, when we heard about the 20 trucks, maybe to put it in perspective for those who haven't been following, since December, like the director of the WHO mentioned, this is the first time 20 trucks made their way to Tigray. And to put that into perspective, based on WFP, this is actually an old data. We keep repeating 100 trucks per day is needed, but of course the problem became worse during the past 6 months. So let's take the 100 trucks per day. That would amount into 120,000 trucks required, during the past 4 months. And 20 trucks boils down into 0.016%. So with that context, and the humanitarian truce, when it was declared on the 24th of March, both the Abiy government and the Tigray government, or the Ethiopian government and Tigray government, released and mentioned and emphasized it in different ways, even used different semantics. So with that background, what is your take, Yosef, on given what we know today, given what Faisal mentioned as well, we learned about the meeting of General Tadesh Wareda and Brahanu Jula somewhere in Afar. And but still, all that talk, all that humanitarian truce, how should we understand that? How should we take, what is being done and what's being said. Joseph, you're muted. Let me unmute you. Yeah.
All right. Probably, both of them have given us a picture from the other side, from the either from the neutral side or from the Ethiopian side. But let me put the emphasis on the TPLF leadership and look through their eyes, what they should have done and cover all these the questions that you have raised. The first one, I think, I was not trying to be very pessimistic when I said that the two courses will eventually lead to war. What I'm trying to say is that it's not going to be, if it is left only up to Ethiopia or TPLF or the peace process that is going on by through the mediation of Kenya and Obasanjo, then it will eventually lead to war. It is, if peace is going to come, it will be through the pressure of the West. And how do you contribute towards that? The TPLF, to me, the last time when it accepted the truce, last time we met, I kept emphasizing on the fact that they kept legitimizing the Abiy's process of peace rather than bringing doubt into his into the process that he was. For example, when he said he accepted the humanitarian truce, one of the things that later I talked about Dr. Solomon Mezgobu's revelation, I would say, because it was revealed to us in his interview last time that the Tigray leadership has already announced or has already accepted cessation of hostilities on December 19, 2021, more than three months now, and it could have capitalized on it. Had it made it public before, instead of legitimizing Abiy's initials, as if it looked at this and as if was taking the initial step, and inadvertently they provided a cover to him. They made him seem as the statesman, as the one who was looking, who was genuinely searching for peace. That was the first mistake that they made. But to come also, number two, the nature of the blockade itself, the nature of the blockade itself, it was designed and executed at Addis Ababa, at Arat Kilo, not at the lower level like our Arba or the Amhara leadership. In fact, what Dr. Solomon was saying about the showmanship around our Arba, Obasanjo, even Obasanjo was calling our Arba, pleading with him to let the trucks go. The last time it was the most recent one was the ambassador, the U.S. ambassador in Addis Ababa. He made a trip all the way to Samara to plead with him. So it shows you that the narrative of Abiy is the one that they bought in the end. What they were saying was, had it not been for our Arba, Abiy could have done this. So in a way, they gave him a way out for Abiy. And part of that was precisely because the TPLF leadership didn't make it clear that the division of labor that Abiy has been using, they should have exposed him, for what it is, whereby the official leaders would take the blame for the blockade, the killer leaders, so that Abiy would be seen in the eyes of the West as someone who is doing his best to alleviate the misery of Tigray. So this is obvious, because the world is not going to react against minor killer leaders, but it's going to react against the national leader. So they were giving him a cover to the national leader. Number three is about the unfettered access that both of them were talking about, But Ethiopia has been using, again, a drip-by-drip mechanism, again, designed and executed in Addis Ababa. Last time that I did interview with you, Getachew in Tigrinya, I talked about an efficient storage system that is now being applied in the western part of the world, whereby the storage system, the goods in the storage system do not last long. They have to be picked up quickly. So this efficient system, you told me that the name was just in time, ironically is being used now to starve a whole population. The way the Ethiopian government is using this system is never to establish a huge storage in Tigray, even if it allows it. If it never, the reason why they are talking about 20 trucks, 40 trucks is precisely because of that. What they want to do is to have this big storage in Afar and Amhara, and then provide to Tigray a food supply that could only last, let's say, for about 2 weeks. This way, they could keep the leverage. Anytime they want to go to war, or anytime they want to have a concession from Tigray, then they can stop, they can interrupt that flow. And the moment they interrupt that flow, the whole of Tigray will be again at risk. So the entire distribution process is made in this just-in-time storage system. So that's one of these things also have been could have been made clear to the world. They should expose why Ethiopia is applying this drip-by-drip mechanism in providing food or medical supply to Tigray. But already, I believe Getachew already talked about this unfettered process, but it doesn't cover a lot of ways. The other way that this unfettered access could be also explained by looking at different entry points. Why is it that the entire the entire aid is coming through Afar through only one entry point through Abala? Why not through, for example, through Kobo? It's a parallel. The Afar road and the Kobo Desi road run parallel to one another, and they are as good as anything, the other road. It's used also to, before supply lines used also to come through Kobo. Why not through Kobo? Why not even through Sokota? For example, now in Sokota, the people of Sokota are receiving a lot of aid. And if you look at Sokota, it's a few miles down, you find the Kolatambien. Why not through Sokota? Not only that, why confine whatever help that they are getting through air, for example, only through small planes? At one time, Dr. Debretsion mentioned that it is intentionally done by Abiy. He refused to provide cargo planes. He refused even for cargo planes of the United Nations to go to Mekelle. So you could see a lot of sincerity tests that could be applied on Abiy, that you could easily fail. Then there is an unfettered access also you could apply it to areas. We have to remember, let's not forget that when we talk about the siege of Tigray, we are not talking about the land, but about the Tigrayans, about the people. It's the people that are being under siege. Now, if that is the case, then it makes sense for Abiy to also conduct a siege on Tigrayans that are outside of Tigray. That's exactly what the woman in Atlanta, what the girl in Atlanta was talking about, of concentration camps inside Addis Ababa. So, if he's really sincere about his about the plight of Tigrayans, then who prevented him? It couldn't be Awal Arba or what you call the Amhara leaders that have prevented him from lifting the siege of Tigrayans that live outside of Tigray. That's another one you could see it. Another one that we could see it is the unfettered way is the services that already Dr. Solomon spoke about. the Tigrayan leadership should have mentioned, I believe, that it should be expanded to include not only the bulky ones like food, medicine, and fuel, that of course should come through trucks, but also the services at the tip of the Abiy's finger, electricity, banking, and telecommunication. All of these are at the tip of his finger. He could switch it on and off if he's really sincere about, and then that also should be another test. That what I'm talking about is these are the things that would expose him for what he is, and that is what the Tigrayan leadership should do. They should try to expose him for what he is by showing all the kind of mechanisms that he is using in order to, conduct a siege on Tigray. The other way that could also be looking at the unfettered access to the types of things, So that has also been mentioned by Dr. Solomon. That is cash, for example. But I would expand that in a different way. For example, up to now, more than $1 billion have been used have been given for aid for Tigray. Almost none of them has reached in Tigray. Only 5% of that has reached Tigray, which means that more than $1 billion that has been given in the name of Tigray have been handed over to Ethiopia. Ethiopia has been using this aid. Again, Tigray is not only losing by not having this aid, but also the enemy is using it against it. For example, all the medicine that has been supposedly left for Tigray, if it is being used by Ethiopia, it could also be used by the military. As in money, I believe food and medicine in this case are fungible, and therefore you could see, for example, why is it cash is not part of the aid? Now I'm talking about cash by the Western world, not cash by Ethiopia, not even cash by the diaspora Tigrayans that they could send to their parents, but cash by the West. Why couldn't it be part of the aid? I know the government would cry foul, they would say that they would be used by the Tigrayan government. But there could be a mechanism, the same way the food is being distributed in Tigray by humanitarian organizations, the same way that the money could be also distributed by humanitarian organizations, as in the welfare system in the West, to those salaried people who are not receiving any money from Ethiopia. So I could see a lot of ways of expanding it, and this should have been proposed by Tigray. The last one is the demand for withdrawal of TDF from Afar and the Amhara areas has been mentioned again and again. And whenever those things are mentioned, the Tigrayan leadership should not be shy, in mentioning the fact that a huge part of Tigray is still occupied by Amhara, Tigray, and the Eritrean forces. I think I should stop here. Thank you.
By Ethiopian and Eritrean forces. Thank you, Yosef.
Yeah.
Faisal, what is your take on? You already shared your insight in terms of the optimism you have, given what we saw today, and what we heard about the meetings, all that, and so on. So, can you expand maybe on what your take is on that?
Yeah, well, I think we need to understand that TDF/TPLF doesn't have the switch that everybody's talking about. They have 7 million people who are under siege by a government that is recognized by the rest of the world, including the United Nations and the USA and the Western countries. So TDF/TPLF is in a very weaker bargaining position, not to mention the fact that it has 6 million, 7 million people who are growing frustrated by the day. So it's not really, in my opinion, lack of strategy that they are accepting 20 trucks. It is because Abiy is a recalcitrant, cruel, and calculating leader of a 120 million people country that has the gavel power of the sovereignty of Ethiopia, with which he's playing as he wishes. You recall that he said that TPLF tricked the Turk in the past by accepting food for the people and then using that food against Ethiopia. He thinks this is a leader that thinks that TPLF TDF will trick him to feed the people. And as Joseph implied, he is using food to punish and to cause harm on civilians. This is where the criminal intent of the leader of Ethiopia comes into play. I think people may ask the question as to why the West? Because the West is not as democratic and as humanitarian as we would like. The US government is the same government that prepped Marcos, that prepped apartheid, that prepped Mobutu Sese, who was one of the worst countries. The US doesn't have a good record to feel the pain that we felt when we listened to that young lady from Atlanta. Still, we don't have an option. We have to beg the US and its corrupt, sometimes democratic, but often corrupt process and procedure of lawmaking that Solomon was talking, that can be changed at any time. SBS 3199 or 6600 can be co-opted anytime in the process. We know and we have grown up in this country where contributions to senators can change any day whatever is on the table, as well as the presidential wishes in the White House can also change legislations that are processed. We watched how Karen Bass, who is from our region, was all along for 6600 until she started to run for the mayoral position of Los Angeles. And in a day's time, she switched her position. These are the people, this is the West that we are asking to save people who are under siege for food and fuel and medicine. So I'm not under any illusion as to the role that the US is playing. The US is playing to try to not distance Abiy to the extent possible. They won't even utter the words of genocide or even food blockade or siege. They're trying to avoid that. Some people may argue and say, well, the US doesn't want to, push Abiy further so that they don't have to lose the negotiating and mediation power. But that's not the case. The US will work with any devil who sits the power seat for any government, in this case for Ethiopia, because they see Ethiopia as a strategic ally. So I don't think the TDF, TPLF doesn't understand that bargaining. I think they are working under very, very tough circumstances, and they are working with the devil, i.e. Abiy, who doesn't have an iota of feeling toward these people and the people that he supposedly presides over their country. Having said that, I think, yes, what you have shared with us, Getachew, is very small and anemical given the magnitude of need. I don't believe the US and the West doesn't know this. They do know all these things. They also know through their study and portfolio that they carry about the Ethiopian politics and the regional governments that our of Afar has no swing, or they know that. They have been working, they have been keeping files and dossiers about the EPRDF and the fake democratic and regional system all along. They know it, but they're playing with the music. Abiy wants this, they go along. So I think, where do we go from here? Knowing that the US is playing the very game that Abiy wants, knowing that they know Abiy could in any day, if they wanted, they could try him any day for genocide and for killing or causing harm to millions of people, but they won't do that. and they haven't done that. So what do we have? We do have a truce that is accepted by both sides, knowing that Abiy still is, dragging his feet. TDF, TPLF doesn't have any other alternative except to resume the war. And there is a level of exhaustion of the Tigrayan people and even TDF itself. Both of them have exhausted. So I think we are challenged, knowing all those weaknesses. We are challenged with the question of, can this truce be moved to the next level, knowing all the issues? I think Solomon touched that, the White House may even drag its feet when S 3199 comes to its table. Yes, and I tweeted a few days ago and said it's not final until the final thing is signed, because any Senate in that process can switch their see the amendment until it's signed into law. Any member of the senatorial team or congressional team can add amendments. And where do those amendments come from? Those amendments come from lobbyists. People who work for Abiy are heavily lobbying. No More movement is lobbying. Other groups are lobbying. All it needs is one Congress to say, I want to add this amendment. And that's how the US legislative process works. It's a dirty process that sometimes produces good or bad things. So we have to be ready for that kind of thing. I just believe that short of war, this is the only course that's left for the millions of Tigranians whom the world ignored. I mean, Dr. What's his name? The WHO president, director of WHO.
Yeah,
There, there is no important desk any African can have to lobby on behalf of the people of Tigray, and he has been shouting out of his lungs for that. And guess what? The Dr. Tedros, guess what? The sovereignty check that Abiy has as up to this point is more important than anything, until and unless we get somebody in the White House that says enough is enough. And this president at this particular time is not saying that. So what do we have? We have a truce that seems to have so far produced a small results. I think we can just work around that and see how we can push the envelope while lobbying with US congressional members and US Senate and hope for the best.
Great, thank you, Faisal. Solomon, what is your take? You can take this further in terms of the state of the humanitarian truce between Addis and Magala.
Very robust take from Faisal. A lot of the constraints that he elaborated on are on point. First, I would like to just kind of share my comments within the constraints of what a humanitarian agency like WHO can do. And Dr. Tedros has been a voice for many victims and who needs humanitarian assistance across the world. And as someone from Tigray, he has done his part, and kudos to him. Coming back to Faisal's assessment of what's the ground and how the forces are aligned and what the options are on the table. I agree there are numerous challenges, but let's keep in mind we are still at war. There is an active war going on. The size of skirmishes and the locality of engagements may not be as huge as what was 4 months ago, but there are still active engagements everywhere. Most importantly, one of the major features of this war is the siege. It's the active declaration and persecution of using food, famine as the major feature of the war. A year ago, armament, guns, cannons, drones were the major feature of the war, along with sexual conflict-related sexual violence. The last 4 months, famine is the major feature of the war. So we are at war. Tigray is at war with Abiy and his forces. So the government of Tigray Defense Forces are not held by any agreement or understanding to keep their hands and arms locked when every day scores of people are dying for lack of medicine or hunger. The ultimate responsibility of a state is to protect its citizens. The very reason TDF came to existence is to defend the life and survival of its citizens and the people of Tigray. The life and existence of the people of Tigray is at risk now. So it has a responsibility and it has also cards. It was able to defend the people of Tigray when it was outnumbered, outgunned, outsourced by 1 to 100. Like he correctly pointed out, Faisal correctly pointed out, when it was not even around 10,000 to man enough checkpoints. If you were to disperse the 9,000 special forces of Tigray, then along the entire Tigray state, they would not be enough to man checkpoints. So that our audience would have a comparison. The city of New York has about 32,000 police officers, along 19,000 support staff. TDF now can count up to 250 to 350,000 trained armed personnel. It's not a lame duck. Its responsibility is to protect Tigray. Its responsibility is to protect the people of Tigray. The people of Tigray are dying. We know Abiy is absolutely determined to wipe out that state. Maybe today is not the right time to execute his design. He has done it several times. He has made several attempts, and he will continue. The pressure coming from Europe, United States, particularly around financial pressure and other, may bring him to a platform or a table of conversation that he is willing to consider peace. Someone who has already executed a genocide, someone who is already soaked in blood, someone who, under normal circumstances, should be facing ICC or within a regime change, a war crime within the country, a tribunal, is not going to be a partner in peace. Yes, the stakes are very high. The challenges are numerous. The problems are intractable. It's very complex, but it doesn't change the facts. This is a fascist regime hell-bent in eliminating the entire state and also reuniting the entire and putting in bloodbaths the whole country so that he can stay in power. So that has to, those are facts that cannot be erased. That should be always under consideration. How do you deal with the devil? That's another equation. But it doesn't change the fact. So when TDF plays its cards, they can't lose eye of this fact, this paramount fact, that he may agree some forced negotiation for a cessation of hostility, maybe even a negotiated ceasefire. But what any serious person, any serious political force, any serious military group, responsible military entity like TDF should not lose sight is in a snap, when he sees an opportunity, Abiy is going to change tune and would be ready to invade and wreak havoc again. Nobody could lose sight of that fact. They shouldn't, if anybody is responsible. So, yes, these are very complex. There are many actors. We have to take into consideration both domestic, civil, political actors, but armed forces like OLA, like Somali National Liberation Front, and others, AGO, Afar, and others. They are important factors in this in command. And we hope that they see, all the players see there is something to gain from a peace deal, from a peace agreement. We should put all pressure towards a peace agreement. Political activists, human rights activists, and scholars and other practitioners like my colleagues here should pursue every effort towards that. But we can't lose sight of who or what type of warlords we are dealing with, what kind of fascists we are dealing with. We can't expect an apple fruit or orange fruit from a poisonous tree. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And that brings us to the final section of the show, and a quick final thoughts from each one of you. We just hit the hour. Okay, Yosef, what's the final thought for you want to share? Let me unmute you. Okay, go ahead.
All right. The problem, I think, the fundamental problem in all of this is the West is trying to find a compromise between Abiy and TPLF, the TPLF leadership, between a genocider and its victims. There is no precedence to that. There has never been a case where a genocider and its victims come together while still the genocide is ongoing. We have a different kind of precedences. Either the genocider defeats the victims or the victims defeat the genocider. After that, there could be reconciliations and all that stuff. But there is no case at all where you could reach a compromise. You know, what kind of compromise could the Abiy government and Tigray reach? So that by taking that route, you know, the West has made it even impossible, even for Abiy, you know, to find a way out of this process. For example, let's say the West's main obsession is the unity of Ethiopia. The only way, for example, Abiy could remain as the leader of Ethiopia, but at the same time, without Tigray, of course, Tigray, it would be impossible for the victims to live under him, would be to let go of Tigray, for example. That option is being closed for him even by the West, because they are adamant that Tigray shouldn't leave the unity, from Ethiopia. Now, the only way that's left to him is, you know, to remain in position. But you could take the case of al-Bashir of Sudan, you know. How did he avoid the international court? He avoided it by staying in power. So the only way that Abiy could escape, you know, from being brought to court, the Court of Justice, as a genocider is to remain in power. So he has this incentive to remain in power by hook or by crook. If he has no way out, if there is no way out for him, so the only way for him is to destroy Tigray, and that's exactly what he's doing right now at this moment. And that's why, to go back to the beginning of what I have said, there are only, at the moment I see, there are only two roads, and both of them will lead to eventually to a war. And Tigray, as Dr. Solomon has been mentioning, it has to do something. It cannot simply go on. This cannot simply go on. We will see what this drip by drip method, how far it would go. But I don't think they will have to give it a lot of time, because eventually, mass starvation is going to be the end result of all of this. And at that point in time, the Tigray leadership cannot do anything. If they have to take the step, it has to be quickly. That's how I feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Yosef, for that. Faisal, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time when the crime is committed by Abiy will catch up with him. It's not really how and why. Those are all really recorded in the annals of our history. Whether it's the level of rape. That young lady in Atlanta said something to the tune of 100,000 plus women have been raped. Those are the ones who admitted, and then another 20, 30,000 were the ones who didn't want to be on the record or shy from camera. You're talking about 150,000 women out of 6-7 million people being raped, and those are the registered. We're not talking about the ones in small villages that were victims to the Eritrean troops, to the Ethiopian. It is just something we cannot fathom. So I think if you recall in the early days of our discussion, as a Somali, I am bewildered why Tigray didn't call for complete secession no matter what. It's just, it doesn't sit well with me as a Somali to experience all that in the hands of that government and still talk about the greatness of the country that did to you. As to Abiy, I think, dictators like Abiy go through three phases in their cycle. I think the first one is they lose the war, and Abiy lost the war, no matter what, whether he goes back again one more time or. I gave in 2018, when he started the war, 2020, to the Somali program BBC, and I said, given the history of TPLF, even if he ambushes them right away, they will come back and they will defeat him, and they did defeat him. And no matter how often he comes back or tries to circle, Ethiopia lost this war under Abiy. And we have seen what happened, and that could happen again. Maybe another front could be the reopening of Western Tigray so that Tigray doesn't stay in the siege that it has been. I don't know. But for the record, Abiy lost the war once, and in totality, he's not the winner, he's the loser. That's the first phase dictators and tyrants go. The second one is they lose history. Abiy has lost history in the sense that even his closest allies who pampered him when he came to the office, the ultra-nationalist Amharas, the, some Oromos who thought that finally their son took the Aret Kilo, the, democratic-leaning Somalis who thought that somebody from the south finally took over Aret Kilo. You can go down they all today are saying, when can this saint leave Aret Kilo so that some level of sense will come back? So he lost history as much as Mengistu today is lost in the books, in the history books in Ethiopia's calculations. Abiy is a lost case. So that's the second. The third and the final is either run away or get, marshaled in one form or another in international courts. I don't know when that will come, but given the narrative that we have been exchanging today, the things that we have heard from that young lady, I think that's on the record even by UN human rights groups, the very institution that he was trying to stop to carry its mission last week when Ethiopia introduced that motion not to pay. All those are venues for a repository of data and information of the magnitude of genocide and rape and using food and siege for war. So when that will catch up with Abiy in his graveyard or some other time when we don't know. But those three stages, I think in my opinion, he's in his last stage, whether he will go out because he lost the war and some other groups come and took over Arat Kilo, or there may be a negotiated means of Abiy to do some transition. I don't know. I don't have that. But all I know is he is in the last leg of those three stages that usually tyrants go through, and the rest is a narrative and just a talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Faisal, for that. Actually, the easiest way to look at how his reputation, everything is going down, just look at his Twitter account. And a year ago, whatever he posts, immediately within a minute or two, a lot of reactions. Now, after 20 hours, whatever he says, nobody reacts. If anything, they will react negatively. Solomon, your final thoughts for the day.
Thank you. I think minor correction on the calculation, the number of tracks, I assume should be at 100 tracks a day, anywhere between 12,000 to 80,000, depending on when you start counting. So maybe there is a typo, not close to 120,000, but still significant, a lot. I think I would like to kind of wrap around where I started, particularly with the US administration. Number one, they have to be very careful, cautious in modeling humanitarian assistance and political considerations. Humanitarian assistance has been politicized a number of times, we know that. But I thought we have learned lessons from the 1980s. And the lessons drawn from there corrected, and humanitarian assistance was delivered and saved many lives. Those baselines, those lessons should apply now. The second piece is you can't have both ways. If the primary objective and the paramount objective is, number one, securing or having a stable Horn of Africa, if that's the primary strategic interest of the United States, it needs to make a good look and analysis which forces, what kind of configuration, who are the partners in helping the United States ensure a modicum of stability and security in the area. You can't have that strategic interest, but so shallow to prop up someone who has completely unraveled it. This is just an oxymoron. So US policymakers need to figure that out and need to figure that out right away. The third piece is for stakeholders, political actors in the Horn of Africa need to start looking seriously into owning the process as opposed to having dictates and working together in looking into new arrangements or new partnerships that would facilitate to resolve current conflicts, but also start processes towards peace and a stable region. Oftentimes, they have been waiting to get some blessing from the current leaders, like what Abiy's national dialogue, which is, I think, a crap. Sorry for my language, but that's what it is. Or some arrangement or facilitation from EU or the United States. Political actors have seen enough over the last 4 or 5 decades that a good chunk of this process, they need to be able to own, chaperone, and partner together. So that's what I would like to leave with. And thank you very much for having me in this panel. Very interesting group.
Thank you, Solomon. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for, as usual, for your insight. And I hope to see you next week. Good night from here.
Good night.
You have been following us live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. This is a weekly show, each panel from UMD Media. UMD Media works on understanding, measuring, and doing, and tries to contribute for an evidence-rich, evidence-led discourse and decision-making in the Horn of Africa. Please share, subscribe, follow us, like our shows so that the algorithms behind the social media platforms can further distribute our content. Your host was Gita Josefa. Bye from here. Good night.